My first assignment was at the seminary. I was ordained in 2009, 26 years old. I was first put at the seminary by my superiors. Father LaRue's the rector, was the rector at the time, still is. And a few months after I received that assignment, Father LaRue asked me to start taking care of the little mission in Waterloo, Iowa that depended on the seminary in Winona at the time. So fast forward to 2013, so 4 years later, one of the young men from that mission chapel is in the seminary. His name is Josh Jacobs. And he comes to my office one night and lets me know that his great-grandfather is in the hospital because he is suddenly paralyzed from the waist down. Now, Josh had a brother named Jordan, and they were twins. They are twins. And their mother, Robin Jacobs, is the woman that in a previous video I had said took care of the catechism classes for this one lady who wanted to be received into the church. Remember in a former video. So Robin, her sons Josh and Jordan, Josh at the seminary. Robin Jacobs was a convert, and her side of the family, so her married name is Jacobs, but her maiden side of the family were Lutheran. And the man who was in the hospital, paralyzed from the waist down suddenly, was her grandfather, so her mother's father. It's kind of a family tree. So Josh knocks on my door and says, "Father, my great-grandfather Hank, Grandpa Hank, is in the hospital, paralyzed from the waist down, and Jordan, his twin brother, is with him, and Jordan's been talking to him. It appears that the end of his life is approaching, and he's told Jordan he's interested in becoming a Catholic." So we went. It was my mission chapel, so it was appropriate for me to take care of it. We got in the car. We drove down. This was like 8:30 at night, 8 o'clock at night. We drove for the 3.5 or so hours it took to get to the hospital in Mason City, Iowa, where he was. And I've been a priest for 4 years, stationed at the seminary, so last rites and receiving converts into the church at the very end was not something I was used to, certainly. So I was studying my ritual and my pastoral theology manual. I had asked a little bit of advice from Father LaRue. We're driving down there, long drive. We get there pretty much in the middle of the night, 11:30 or something like that. And we walk in the hospital room, and Jordan is there with their great-grandfather. And Jordan looks a little upset, a little frustrated. And he comes out in the hallway. He talks with me and with Josh for a few minutes and says, "Well, Grandpa was saying he wanted to become a Catholic, and now he seems to be backpedaling a bit." So we all went in the room, and I sat down next to his bed, and we chatted for a few minutes. And the boys were like, "Grandpa, a few hours ago you wanted to become a Catholic, and now something's changed. What?" We tried to explain a little bit how, it's the end of your life, and we want you to die in the true faith. And he was sitting up in bed. He was very pleasant, very smiley, very patient. And he said, no, he was 91 years old. 91 years old. And he said, "You can't, I haven't talked to Grandma about it." So his wife. "I haven't talked to Grandma about it. And when you've been married for over 60 years, so they've been married for over 60 years. When you've been married for over 60 years, you don't just make a big decision like that without talking to Grandma." Very simple, very logical response to our trying to encourage him to think about becoming a Catholic even more. And at a certain point, it was clear, no, I'm not going to convert if I don't talk to my wife about it. And so we got on a little bit to the family and talking, and we had a pleasant conversation for a little bit. And he, one of the most, I think, charming and one of my favorite just sound bites ever in my life was at a certain point in that conversation, he was German. And he had come from Germany when he was a young man, but he still had an accent. And he was talking about his granddaughter, Robin, and what a good job she did, what a strong family she has, and what a good job she did in particular with Josh and Jordan. Well, with their brother too, but Josh and Jordan were in the room. So, and at one point he just looked at me and he said, Josh and Jorgo, good boys, yeah? Yeah. And it was just so, I think they blushed a little bit. Josh and Jorgo, good boys, yeah? Yeah. Anyways, so it was a bit frustrating that he had changed his mind, obviously. Josh and I went back to the seminary. Josh and Jordan took it pretty well. They would pray for him. He was a simple man. He had been a turkey farmer for decades and decades. He had a turkey farm in Iowa, and he had a very straightforward, good view of the world. And this was the decision he'd made, and we would pray for him and recommend his soul to God. So about 2 weeks later, well, in fact, it was two weeks later to the day, Josh Jacobs comes to me again. He says, Father, again, it was the same time of night. It was about 8 o'clock. Father, I just want to ask you to pray for Grandpa Hank because, his body's shutting down. He's not responding, and the doctors think he's not going to live through the night. And I said, of course, Josh, I'll pray for him. And quite frankly, by temperament, I would have left it at that. I don't generally push people to convert. And I think that's significant because after Josh told me to pray for his grandpa who was probably going to die in the night, it wasn't an emotion, it wasn't a feeling, it wasn't a vision, but it was just a cold certitude that I have to go down and talk to him. And so I mentioned that to Josh, and he said, Father, we've already talked to him. And he's like, I know, and you know him better than I do, and maybe praying for him is the best thing we can do, but I'm sure we need to go see him. So I talked to Father LaRue about it. Can I go, even though he's already said no, can I go talk it over with him? At worst, I can help him make an act of contrition. That was what I was thinking. So he asked Father Escara, too, to come and be our gut check, our prudent gut check. Father Escara and Father LaRue, we talked about the different scenarios, if he wanted to convert, if he didn't want to convert, if he was not convinced, just what to do. And again, the worst case scenario would be helping him make an act of contrition, which is something. So Father Escara said, yeah, you should go. So Josh Jacobs and I got in the car and went back down, this time to their hometown, Green, Iowa. He was in the nursing home in Green. He wasn't in the hospital anymore. And so now it's late at night. It's 11:30 or midnight. And I come in with everything except the Blessed Sacrament, just in case. So I've got everything for baptizing him, confirming him, receiving him in the church, all that, everything. My surplice and stole, it was all in my briefcase. And Josh and I walk into the bedroom, and his daughter, Hank, Grandpa Hank's daughter, Josh's grandma, and Robin's mother, was sitting next to the bed. It was very dark, just a little lamp on. And she was surprised to see us there and very bewildered what's going on. Because her grandson walked in with this priest, 26-year-old priest, No, I was 30 by then. I think 30 something, whatever. It was early on. And Josh says, Grandma, I brought a priest to talk to Grandpa since he's most likely going to die tonight. And would you be okay with that? And she's like, yeah, it'd be really good to, have a minister. Because remember, she's Lutheran. Basically a man of God, a man of the cloth to talk to Dad before he dies. And then I just asked if I could have a few minutes alone with him. So Josh took his grandma out into the hallway, and I closed the door, and here I am alone with this 91-year-old man with a German accent in a dark room in the middle of the night. And I remember going up and grabbing his hand. So he had been unresponsive for hours before this, not able to speak. His eyes were closed. To all appearances, he was in a coma. And I grabbed his hand, and I said, Hank, I'm Father Wood. I'm the priest who came to see you a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you remember me, but if you do remember me, and if you do recognize me, I'd like you to open your hand. That's what Father Rue told us. He said, ask them to open their hand instead of squeezing, because for some reason when people are unresponsive in general, it's easier for them to open their hand than to squeeze. So that's what I said. And I felt him try to open his hand. And then I started getting really nervous. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I don't even know if I know what I'm supposed to do. And I said, well, Hank, if you can hear me and if you recognize who I am, could you raise your eyebrows? And his eyebrows went up. And then I had a cold sweat. Now the football had been kicked and the game was started, and I froze. I think it's probably what somebody feels like the first time they go hunting and they, I don't know what they call it. They freeze. You can't take the animal because you've never hunted before. So it was that kind of thing, and I just all blank. And he was lying on his bed, breathing. He had a very belabored breathing. His face was full of pain. You can imagine a 91-year-old man with fine features, a German face, but his face was wrinkled in pain, and his chest was bowed out, as though, and he was kind of stiff, as though the process of stiffening up had already set in or something like that. And he was moaning a little bit once in a while, but he was obviously suffering. And I remember saying a prayer to Our Lady to help me know what to do. And I don't remember how the conversation went after that too well, but I remember basically what happened. And I explained to him, Hank, you know you're going to die tonight. That's what the doctors say. You realize that. And a few weeks ago, you had hesitated to become a Catholic. I very briefly explained to him the motives for believing the Catholic Church is the true Church of Christ. And I said, I'm here as a representative of the Church to give you everything you need to die in the love of Jesus. And I can help you to receive his forgiveness and to die in his peace if you want to become a member of the Catholic Church. And so I gave an explanation, and I said, so Hank, if you want to be received into the Catholic Church and to receive the sacraments of Christ and to die in his embrace as a Catholic, please open your hand. And he opened it. And remember, his face is practically expressionless, but he opens his hand. And I say, I want to ask one more time. I'm asking you if you want to be received into the Catholic Church. If it's yes, open your hand. And he opened his hand again. So I went into the hallway and I said, well, Josh, he wants to be a Catholic. And his daughter is there. it's late night, she's bewildered. We go back in, and Josh and his grandma stay there for the whole thing. So I explained to Hank, that I was going to baptize him conditionally, in case that was necessary. And I did that. And I remember forgetting to tell him I was about to pour cold water on his head, and he jumped in his bed when I poured the water on his head for the conditional baptism. And Josh was making the responses, and Josh's grandma was standing nearby watching. I confirmed him, I helped him make an act of contrition and gave him absolution, and I gave him the last rites. And I like to think I remember him trying to strain to hear what was going on. It almost looked like he was trying to cock his ear towards the Latin and the ceremonies. And when I anointed his hands, I remember saying, "Open your hands so I can anoint them. That'll beg God's forgiveness for any sins you've committed by your hand." And his hand opened, I remember, and so on. And then I gave him the apostolic blessing. And Father Jacobs reminded me of this, actually, because I called Josh Jacobs this morning to make sure we had all the story straight. And he reminded me that as soon as the apostolic blessing was done, his grandfather, who had been obviously in suffering and whose breathing was labored and whose body was a little bit contorted with pain, just let out a groaning sigh, basically, right at the end of the apostolic blessing. And Father Jacobs told me, I thought he died at that moment. I remember that. And I had remembered it too, and Father mentioned it. And Father said, I just remember how he gave that sigh that seemed to be like a release of all tension. He calmed down. He looked very much at peace, and his breathing became normal. And then, and up until that point, Grandpa Hank didn't know that Josh was there. So Josh told me, what you said to him, Father, at that point was, it's okay. You have everything you need. It's okay to go now. And then I invited Josh to talk to him. And Josh went up and talked to his grandpa. Grandpa Hank, it's me, Josh. And we remember Grandpa Hank's face brightened up because he loved his great-grandchildren. And he recognized the voice immediately. And there really was a look of peace, recognition, and just happiness that Josh was here in the room with him. And Josh talked to him and also said, Grandpa, it's okay, you can go now. You don't have to hang on anymore. And his daughter she was grateful that that he was receiving some Christian support at the end. For sure, she was grateful for that. She was crying when we left. She was saying, thank you for coming and seeing my dad. Thank you for helping him, at this moment, basically. Josh's brother Jordan had arrived just when all of that was over. And we let him know that his grandpa had wanted to be received in the church and received everything. So anyways, Josh and I drive back home to the seminary. And we get in at like 3 or 4 in the morning. And Grandpa Hank died about 6 hours later. 6-7 hours later, so the next morning. There's a couple things that are interesting about Grandpa Hank. Grandpa Hank was born in Germany, and when he was 18 years old, he was drafted into the German army. So that's World War II. Grandpa Hank was drafted into the army at 18 years old, and the Germans sent him to fight on the Russian front. And if you know your war history, to a large extent, that was one of the most desperate fronts that Germany had to fight on. And Josh told me that his grandpa used to say, I don't know why I'm alive. I don't know why I'm still alive. I was on the Russian front, and I had my best friends dying to the left of me, to the right of me. And on top of that, his platoon at some point had taken 2 prisoners, and he was given the order to shoot the prisoners, to kill the prisoners. And he said, I can't do that. He told his German commanding officer, I can't do that. I can't shoot them. I don't think it'd be the right thing to do. And in the German army at that time, to disobey an order like that in those circumstances he should have been summarily executed. And so he used to tell Josh, I don't understand why I'm still alive. My friends died in the war. I should have been executed for disobeying orders. Later he came to America and started his work in the Midwest. And another thing he told Josh was, when I was little, he had a hard life because he had a single mom when he was growing up in Germany, and food was scarce. Sometimes he had to go hungry because they didn't have the means of life that were just necessary for feeding Hank every day. And he started working for this couple in Germany that was Catholic, and he told Josh, I've always had a great respect for Catholics because of what these people did for me. They let me work for them. I could bring the money home to Mom, and they knew that I didn't have a lot to eat at home and sometimes had to go hungry. So they would always, the woman would always give me hot potatoes, and she would tell me, eat them before you get home because otherwise you may not have a dinner. So, and he said the woman was always praying. I never understood. She was always praying. It was just, I didn't know what the woman was doing. So he had a love or a respect, at least, for Catholics his whole life. And I think he knows now why he was allowed to live, why he didn't die when so many others did. As the end of the story, so he was buried soon after that, and his family are Lutheran, so he received a burial in the Lutheran church with their Lutheran burial service. I went with Josh after that to his graveside in Green, Iowa, and it was a cold winter day, end of November, beginning of December. He would have been 92. His birthday was supposed to be shortly after he passed away. It would have been his birthday, so it was almost 92. And we went to his graveside, just Josh Jacobs and myself. We brought everything we needed to bless the little plot: incense, holy water. It was so cold, so windy. We put on our surplices, but the wind was whipping them around our bodies, and we tried to light charcoal behind the car door. There was so much wind, and we couldn't get the charcoal lit, and our hands started getting numb. The holy water stoop and sprinkling and cold and everything. And we did finally bless his grave. And a couple cars drove by. Josh knows all the people in Green. He's like, wow, there they go. They must be wondering what in the world Josh Jacobs is doing at his grandpa's graveside, all dressed up like this. So Grandpa Hank got even his tomb blessed. So it's quite a story. I'm grateful to our Lord for giving me that experience. Incidentally, Josh Jacobs is a priest now, Father Jacobs. And once again, his poor mom, probably mortified that her name's coming up for whoever's going to watch this. And once again, Mrs. Jacobs, I'm sorry if it embarrasses you. It's unbelievable what the love and the providence and the mercy of God will do for an upright soul that's searching for him.